Picture the most obeyed law in American history. It has no number. It was never voted on. No president signed it. No court upheld it. No police officer has ever enforced it. And yet 300 million people follow it every single day, most of them without once asking where it came from. The law says you will eat 3 times a day. Breakfast in the morning, somewhere around 7 or 8, lunch at noon, or close enough to noon that your stomach files a complaint by 12:15, dinner in the evening around 6, miss one and people ask if you're feeling all right, eat at 3 in the afternoon and 11 at night instead, and you're snacking, you're off your schedule, you're doing something faintly wrong, even though no one can tell you what rule exactly you've broken. Now add the details that make it stranger. The smell of coffee at 7 in the morning, so universal it might as well be piped in by the government. The smell of a hot griddle at noon drifting out of 10,000 lunch counters at the same synchronized minute, from Maine to San Diego. The smell of onions hitting a pan at 6 in the evening in a million kitchens at once. A continental wave of frying that moves west with the time zones like weather. Office towers that empty at 12 and refill at 1, as if somebody rang a bell. 'Cause somebody did ring a bell. That's the part nobody remembers. Here's the thing that should keep you up at night, except that tonight I'm going to make sure it does the opposite. This schedule, 3 meals, fixed hours, the whole apparatus, is not ancient. It is not natural. It is not what your body asks for, and for most of human history it is not what people did. Your ancestors, the overwhelming majority of them, ate their biggest meal in the middle of the day and would have found your 6 o'clock dinner bizarre, borderline unhealthy, and possibly a sign of moral decay. Breakfast as you know it barely existed. Lunch, the word, the meal, the little hour carved out of the workday, had to be invented, and we can watch it being invented in specific buildings, in specific decades, some of them with the receipts still on file. So who decided? Who decided that noon belongs to sandwiches? Who moved dinner from the middle of the day to the end of it? A migration of the single most important meal in Western life, sliding 6 hours across the clock over the course of about a century. Who decided that a meal should even have a fixed hour at all, when for thousands of years the honest answer to when do you eat was when the work allows it? Tonight we're going to find them, the deciders, and I'll tell you now so you can relax into it. There is no villain at the end of this, no committee in a smoky room. There is something much stranger. There's a whistle, there's a bell, there's a railroad clock, and one very specific day, the 18th of November, 1883, when noon itself, the actual position of the sun in the sky, was overruled by men with telegraphs, and certain American cities experienced noon twice in the same day. We'll be there for that. It's one of the most quietly astonishing days in American history, and almost nobody has heard of it. We're going to travel the whole road, a manor village in medieval England, because that's where the old meal world was built, the one America inherited and then demolished. A colonial farm where dinner meant noon, and the whole landscape was organised around a bell. A mill town where a steam whistle picked dinner up and carried it away. A marble and chrome room in Philadelphia in 1902 where lunch became a machine you put a nickel into. A signal office on the day they executed local time. A union hall where men fought and bled to get the lunch hour written into a contract. And a kitchen in 1956 at 6 in the evening exactly, where the whole system finally clicked shut and started pretending it had always been there. One honest word before we go, because this channel keeps its accounts clean. The dates, the buildings, the prices, the whistles, the timetables, those are real, documented, checkable. But the eyes I'm going to lend you, the ploughman's boy, the mill girl, the clerk with his nickel, those are composites, stitched together from the kind of lives the records describe, because the records themselves mostly belong to people too tired to write anything down. The rooms are real. The people standing in them for you tonight are borrowed. I'll always tell you which is which, and where the historians themselves are still arguing, and with the history of meals they argue more than you'd think, because few subjects attract confident nonsense like the history of food. I'll tell you that too instead of pretending. So, I make these history stories, and honestly I still have no idea whether anyone actually sleeps to them, or whether you're all just weirdos who like drifting off to the sound of a factory whistle stealing a farmer's dinner hour. Either way, subscribe if you feel like it. Get comfortable. Loosen the day's grip a little. Here we go. Begin with cold. Not the crisp, invigorating kind. The damp English kind. The kind that gets into wool and stays there. October cold in the year 1389, on a manor in Kent where the plough oxen are breathing steam in the half-dark. You are 11 years old, and you've been awake since before light, because you are the boy who walks at the head of the oxen, and oxen do not wait. Your hands are cracked at the knuckles. There is mud to the middle of your shins, mud with the particular smell of turned autumn earth, wet iron, rot, and something almost sweet underneath, the smell of a field that has been fed with manure since before anyone alive can remember. Your stomach is a small hard knot, and here is the fact your entire morning is built around. You have not eaten. You will not eat for hours yet, and nobody, not the ploughman swearing gently behind you, not the reeve who assigns the work, not the priest, not you, considers this a hardship worth mentioning. Because in this world, the world that will quietly ship itself across the Atlantic and become the deep grammar of American eating, the morning meal barely exists. There's a word for it in English already. Breakfast, the breaking of the night's fast. The word is on record by the 15th century, and the idea is older. But a proper, sit-down, expected morning meal for a working man in his prime. The moralists have opinions about that, and the moralists in 1389 are not a fringe group. They are the operating system. The Church teaches, following Gregory the Great, that gluttony has several faces, and one of them, prepropere the schoolmen call it, is simply eating too soon, eating before you need to, eating before the appointed hour, as if your belly and not God's order ran the day. Thomas Aquinas worked it into the Summa a century before you were born. Too soon, too expensively, too much, too eagerly, too daintily. 5 ways to sin with a spoon, and the very first one is about the clock. Now, and this is where I have to keep the account honest, because this is exactly the corner of history where confident nonsense breeds. It is not true that nobody in the Middle Ages ate in the morning. Historians have gone back and forth on this for decades. Labourers doing heavy work often got bread and ale early, precisely because you cannot plough on an empty body forever. Children ate in the morning, the sick ate, travellers ate. What's true is softer and stranger than the myth. Morning eating existed, but it had no dignity. It was fuel taken standing, slightly apologised for. No one built a room for it. No one set an hour for it. The first real meal of the day, the meal with a name, a table, and a social order, came later, in the middle of the morning, and it was called dinner. Hold on to that word, because tonight it is going to travel farther than any person in this story. Dinner. It comes down through Old French disner, and if you trace it all the way back through the Latin underneath, it appears to mean, this is the part I love, to unfast, to break the fast. Etymologically speaking, dinner is breakfast. The main meal of the day and the first meal of the day were, at the root, the same idea, because for most of history they were the same meal. Everything America will do to its eating schedule over 5 centuries is contained in that one buried word like a seed. The word for the day's great meal literally means the first food after not eating. And then the meal itself will spend 500 years drifting away from its own name, sliding from morning toward midnight, until Americans in 1950 are eating dinner at an hour their ancestors reserved for sleep. But you don't know any of that. You are 11, you are cold, and what you know is the sound that is about to save your morning. The bell. It comes across the fields from the church tower, and your body answers it before your mind does. Your mouth floods, your shoulders drop, the knot in your stomach turns over like a dog hearing its name. Bells run this world. Nobody on this manor owns a clock. There are mechanical clocks in England now, big iron things in cathedral towers, but out here time is told by the sky and announced by bronze. The bell says when to pray, when to plough, when to stop ploughing, and, the only stroke anyone truly listens for, when to eat. Remember this bell. Give it a face. Hang it in the tower of your mind, because you are going to meet it again and again tonight, wearing different costumes. It will turn into a farm bell in Indiana, a factory bell in Massachusetts, a school bell, a whistle, an electric buzzer. The soft chime of a phone reminding a man in an office to eat something. It is the oldest character in this story and it outlives everyone. The ploughman unhooks the team. You walk back across the furrows. Walking on ploughed ground is its own skill, ankle deep, each step a small negotiation, and the smell reaches you before the hall does. Wood smoke first, then pottage, peas and beans and barley boiled since dawn in an iron pot, with cabbage, with an onion, with today, because 'tis not a fast day. A knuckle of bacon somewhere down in the depths of it, more rumour than meat, but enough to change the smell of the whole pot. Your stomach makes a sound like a door opening. This is dinner. Look at the light. It is the middle of the morning. Depending on the season and the Lord's habits, the great meal of the day happens somewhere between 9 and 11, maybe pushing toward noon. And I need you to understand what that means, because it isn't a quirk. It is the whole architecture. In a world lit by fire and daylight, where every calorie of candle wax costs real money, you put your biggest meal in the middle of the working light, when the cooking can be done by day and the eating fuels the afternoon's labour. Eating your main meal after dark, the way you do, the way everyone you know does, that would strike these people as close to madness. Cook by candlelight, burn good light on chewing, go to bed with a heavy stomach, which every physician from Galen on down says breeds nightmares and rots digestion. Dinner in the evening isn't just unfashionable in 1389. It is, in the exact meaning of the word, unenlightened. It happens in the dark, and here is a small, perfect fact to fold under your pillow. The English word noon does not come from the number 12. It comes from nona hora, the 9th hour of the monastic day, which was 3 in the afternoon. Nons was a prayer service, and in the early medieval centuries it sat at mid-afternoon, and in many religious houses the day's main meal could not be eaten until the office was sung. And then, over a few hundred years, noon slid backward from 3 o'clock to midday and parked itself at 12, where it has sat ever since. Why did it move? Historians still argue the details, and I'll be straight with you. No document says plainly, we moved it because we were hungry. But the leading suspicion, and it has been the leading suspicion for a long time, is exactly that. Monks fasting until the 9th hour found reasons to sing the 9th hour earlier and earlier. The prayer dragged the meal, or the meal dragged the prayer, and the word came sliding down the afternoon with them. 3 hours of drift until the very name of midday was a fossil of monastic appetite. I can't prove the hungry monk's theory to you beyond doubt, and I won't pretend to. But I can tell you this much for certain. The word noon moved, which means the thing you think of as the fixed centre of the day, the one honest hour, the sun at the top hour, even that has already been dragged across the sky once by human stomachs. It will be dragged again by Americans with telegraphs, and when it happens tonight you'll recognise the move. Inside the hall, the order of the world is laid out on trestle tables. This is the other thing to understand about the old meal geography. When you eat and what you eat announce exactly who you are, with a precision no passport will ever match. At the high end, on a raised step, the Lord's table, white bread, wheat bread, actual loaves with actual crumb and wine, and a servant whose entire job is the cutting of meat. Down here in the body of the hall, dark bread, barley and rye, dense enough to stop an arrow, and the pottage and ale. Everyone drinks ale. You've drunk small ale since you were weaned. It's safer than water, and nobody thinks anything of it. You get your wooden bowl filled, you get your bread, you eat with your own knife and your fingers and a horn spoon, and for a quarter of an hour the cold and the oxen and the mud stop existing. One meal. That's the day's spine. There will be one more toward the end of the light. Supper, and there's your second word to pocket for later. Supper comes from the French super, and under that is soup. Bread soaked in broth. Supper is, at its root, soup. A light thing, a warm thing, a using up the pot thing, eaten in the last of the daylight. Bread, cheese, whatever the noon pot still holds. Maybe an egg if the hens are generous. Then the fire is banked. In the towns they still ring a bell for it. Couvre-feu, cover fire. The word curfew is literally a bedtime instruction about embers. And the world goes dark and lies down, because light is expensive and morning is not negotiable. Dinner in the middle of the day, big. Supper at the edge of dark, small. Breakfast a furtive crust if it exists at all. Hold that shape in your mind. That is the pattern. One great meal amidships, a light meal at dusk, that Europe will carry basically intact for centuries. The pattern the ships will pack along with the sea grain and the salters when they head west across the Atlantic. Because it does cross. Sail forward now, 360 years. Let the manna dissolve. Let the bell keep ringing through the dark as everything changes around its sound. And come ashore in Massachusetts in the year 1750, on a farm in the Connecticut River Valley, where it is once again the middle of the morning, and you are once again hungry, and once again this is considered the correct order of things. You are a hired girl now, 14, bound out to a farm family because your own family has 8 children and stony land. You have been up since 5. You know because the rooster says so and the goodwife says so, and between those two authorities there is no meaningful gap. Morning food in this house is real but modest, and, pay attention, it is not a meal. Nobody sits. There is yesterday's bread. There is cheese. There a bowl of hasty pudding. Cornmeal mush, because this is America now and Indian corn is the grain that says so. Eaten standing by the hearth with milk still warm from the cow. The men take theirs after the first chores, an hour into the day's work, leaning in the doorway. There is beer on the table at sunrise, or cider, hard cider, and children drink it, and no one blinks. It is fuel. It has no ceremony, no fixed minute, no name worth capitalizing. The old suspicion of morning eating has faded. Nobody here quotes Aquinas at you, but its shadow survives as informality. You eat something in the morning. You do not have breakfast, the institution. That is still waiting to be built, and it will take a railroad to build it. The day on this farm has one pole star, and everyone, family, hired hands, the dog, orbits it. Dinner, midday. When the sun stands highest, the whole scattered workforce of the farm folds itself back toward the kitchen, the way tide comes back up a river, and the good wife's morning, your morning, is a single long countdown toward producing it. Salt pork and beans, brown bread, boiled vegetables from the garden you weeded, maybe a fowl, pie for dinner, pie whenever. New England runs on pie. All of it cooked over an open hearth by two women in long skirts working within scorching distance of live flame. Which is, by the way, among the most dangerous ordinary jobs in colonial America. You have burn scars on your forearms already, thin white lines like tally marks. Every woman you know has them. Call them the receipts of the midday system. Somebody paid in skin every single day to put the big meal at noon. And how does the farm know when noon is? Not from a clock. There's one clock in this county worth the name, in the meeting house, and it's wrong as often as it's right. No. Scratched into the windowsill of the kitchen's south window there is a line, a simple straight scored mark angled just so. When the shadow of the window frame touches the line, the sun is at its highest. Local apparent noon, measured in the oldest way there is. They call it a noon mark, and travellers who cut sundial lines for a fee will make you one for a few pence. When the shadow kisses the scratch, the good wife sends you out to the dooryard, and you take the iron ring or the cow horn or, on this farm, the bell, the small bright bell on its post, and you ring dinner in across the fields. Mark that windowsill, scratch it into your memory next to the bell, because that little line is the purest thing in this whole story. Noon defined by the actual sun, measured by the actual house, unique to this exact spot on the earth. 2 towns west, noon comes a minute later. In Boston it came earlier. Nobody minds, because nobody's noon needs to agree with anybody else's. Every farm in America keeps its own time, true solar time, the sun's own signature, and dinner rides on it. 133 years from this morning, almost to the season, that scratch on the windowsill will be overruled by a telegram from Washington, and the sun will lose its oldest job. You'll be there. But first you have to eat. The men come in smelling of hay and horse and their own labour, and they sit. This meal, everyone sits. And the master of the house says grace over the pork and beans, and for half an hour or more the farm's entire economy pauses to refuel itself in one room. That's what colonial dinner is. Not a menu, a gathering of the workforce. The word supper still means what it meant in Kent. The light meal at day's end, mush and milk, bread and cheese, remainders. And breakfast is still the standing snack of the early chores. The medieval shape has crossed an ocean intact. It has swapped pottage for pork and beans, ale for cider, the Lord's Hall for the farm kitchen. The skeleton is identical, and it works. Understand that before we break it, this system is not a backwardness waiting to be corrected. It is precision fitted to a world where the work is at home. The field is a 10-minute walk from the table. The workshop is under the house. The shop is the front room. 90-some% of Americans at the first census live on the land or next to their work, and when work and home share a dooryard, the big midday meal is simply the most intelligent way to run a human body through a working day. The system will not fall because someone finds a flaw in it. It will fall because the dooryard itself is about to be abolished. Slide forward again, 88 years this time, through the Revolution, past the first mills, out over the mountains with the wagons, and put your boots down in Indiana in June of 1838, in the bottomland corn country, where you are now a hired man of 19 chopping weeds out of a corn row that runs so long it appears to have a horizon. This is the high summer of the American agrarian clock, the system at its loudest and most confident, the version of it that will get fossilized into legend as how things always were. Let's live one dinner of it properly, because we are about to watch it die. The heat sits on the field like a hand. Your hoe handle is polished glossy where your grip rides it, and your palms went past blister into callus weeks ago, and the green smell of cut ragweed is so thick you can taste it behind your teeth. You started at first light with the standing snack. Cold cornbread, side meat, coffee, taken in the kitchen doorway, because this is still not a meal, it's ignition. Since then, 5 hours of hoe. Your back has stopped complaining, sentence by sentence, and settled into one long paragraph. And the whole morning long, without ever quite thinking it, you have been listening. Every hired man in this county hoes with one ear aimed backward at the house. Because the bell decides. There it is again, our oldest character, come to America and promoted. On this farm it hangs on a locust post by the kitchen door, a cast-iron farm bell with a pull rope, and some farms use a tin dinner horn instead, a yard of it, and down south it might be a conch shell, and every farm wife has her own hand on the rope, her own rhythm, so that men working where 3 farms meet can tell whose dinner is whose the way you tell voices. When it rings, everything with legs turns toward the house. The horses know the bell. That is not folklore. Ask any farmer who ever tried to keep a team working through it. The horses hear dinner and lean home because the bell governs their oats too. An entire landscape, thousands of square miles of it, wired for sound, every farmstead a small bell tower, the whole Midwest ringing itself to dinner in a slow wave that follows the sun's noon westward across the continent at 1,000 miles an hour. Nobody planned that. Nobody even sees it, except from where we're floating tonight. Local sun, local bell, local dinner, the agrarian clock complete. And when I say dinner, I need you to understand what lands on that table, because this is not lunch. This is the largest meal Americans will ever routinely eat, and it happens at noon on a Tuesday for hired men. Fried chicken and ham from the smokehouse, new potatoes in cream, green beans boiled with a fist of bacon, cornbread and wheat bread both, butter the women churned, preserves from fruit the women picked and sugared, buttermilk from the springhouse, cold enough to sweat the pitcher. 2 kinds of pie, because one kind of pie would raise questions about the household. The farm wife and her daughters have been cooking since they banked breakfast coals. The stove, mercifully, is iron now. The open hearth is fading, but an iron cook stove in an Indiana June turns the kitchen into a room you could proof bread in just by standing there. They will feed the men first standing behind the chairs to refill and fetch, and eat afterward in the cooled wreckage. That's in the record too, and it should be said plainly. The golden agrarian dinner ran on the unpaid, unrelenting twice-a-day labour of women who got the leftovers and the dishes. When the whistle steals this meal in the next chapter, something real will be lost, but not everyone will lose equally, and a few will quietly reckon they broke even. You eat until the food, not the clock, tells you to stop. That's the detail to carry forward. There's rest after. A half-hour flat on your back in the barn shade while the worst heat passes, the horses pulling hay, nobody counting minutes, because the schedule bends around the sun and the work, not the other way. The afternoon will run to dark, and supper, the old word alive and well out here, will be light and latish and unceremonious. Mush and milk, cold chicken, bread and preserves. Big noon dinner, little evening supper, the scratch on the windowsill, the bell on the post. 450 years after the manor hall, the shape is still the shape. 2 more things happen that summer, small things, and I want you to hold both, because they are the guns above the mantel and both of them will fire before we sleep. The first, a Yankee peddler comes up the lane in July with a wagon of tinware and notions, and among the clocks and razors he has watches. Cheap ones, brass, loud ticking, not accurate to better than a few minutes a day, but watches, in a farm lane in Indiana. The farmer turns one over in his hand, sun-browned thumb on the white face, and hands it back with a line you should remember. What for? I've got a bell. He is exactly right, and his rightness has perhaps 40 years to live. The second, the farm wife owns a growing shelf of tin, and one piece is a covered tin pail, 2 quarts, with a wire bail, and when the men work the far bottoms too far to walk back at noon, she packs that pail with cold dinner and a boy runs it out to the field. Out here, the pail is the exception, the long-distance option, dinner's ambassador to the edge of the farm. Keep your eye on it, because there is a world assembling itself back east, where the far field is the only field, where every working man is permanently too far from the kitchen to come home. And in that world the exception becomes the rule, and that homely 2-quart pail becomes the coffin. The midday dinner gets carried away in. You can already hear that world if you stand still. Not the bell, under the bell. Away east, in Massachusetts and Rhode Island, along the full lines of hard little rivers, there are brick buildings now, 5 stories, 6, filled with English machinery and Yankee farm daughters, and those buildings have bells too. But their bells don't answer the sun. They answer a schedule, printed, posted, the same in January as in June. The bell has changed masters. That is the whole Industrial Revolution in one sentence, and it is the fulcrum of this entire night. For the first time since the manor, the sound that tells Americans when to eat is about to come from something that does not care where the sun is. So walk east with me, and forward. Leave the hoe standing in the row. Let the Indiana bell fade behind you the way things fade when you're falling asleep. Still ringing, just farther and farther away, a farm wife's wrist keeping time for a world that doesn't know its ending. It has maybe a generation of primacy left. Out ahead of you, in the smoke, something is clearing its throat. A column of steam is rising off a boiler in a mill yard, waiting to be let through a brass valve at the top of a stack, and when it comes out it will make the loudest sound anyone in that valley has ever heard a machine make, and it will make it at the same minute every morning of the year, and it does not know what noon is, and it has never once been hungry. They will call it the whistle, and if this story has a who, if the question in our title has a single face, this is the closest thing to it that ever existed. Fall River, Massachusetts, January 1885. It is dark, real dark, 5-something in the morning, the moon down, the gas lamps hissing their little yellow rooms of light into the cold, and you are awake because the whistle woke you. Not your whistle. The first whistle, the early one, the one that blows across the whole city to tell 14,000 mill operatives that they have time to dress, eat, and walk. You are a weaver now, 23 French-Canadian the way half this street is French-Canadian, 4 looms to your name in a spinning city of granite mills strung along a hilltop above a bay, and your entire relationship to food, everything the ploughboy and the hired girl and the man with the hoe understood about eating, has been reorganized by steam. Feel the morning, because your body already knows the argument this chapter's going to make. The floor is ice under your feet. The room smells of coal smoke, kerosene, damp wool, and last night's cabbage. The window is furred with frost on the inside. Breakfast is tea and bread and salt pork fried fast, eaten by lamplight with your coat already half on, and there is nothing leisurely in it, because the second whistle owns you. Work starts at 6:30, the gates close, and a worker who arrives late finds the door shut and the day's pay docked or gone. The mills of this city run about 60 hours a week that decade, 10.5, 11 hours a day, Saturdays shorter. And every one of those hours is a specific numbered hour. That's the new thing. Not the hardness of the work. Farm work was hard, the numberedness of it. And here, this is the hinge of the whole night, so let me say it slowly. Here is what the mill did to dinner. It did not attack the meal. Nobody in a counting house ever wrote a memorandum abolishing the American midday dinner. The mill did something quieter and absolutely lethal. It moved the work away from the kitchen. That's all. That's the entire mechanism. For the ploughboy, for the hired girl, for the man in the corn row, work stood a 10-minute walk from the table, so the big meal could sit at noon like a keystone. But you, weaver, live a mile from your looms, and at midday the mill grants you, look at the printed rules pasted by the timekeeper's window, 45 minutes, in some mills 30. The great Lowell corporations printed timetable cards decades ago, actual pasteboard schedules that survive in archives, bells listed to the minute, and the dinner interval sits in them like a slot in a machine, a gap between bell and bell, 30 minutes, 45. Try the arithmetic your body runs every day. 15 minutes walk home through January and 15 back with a hill against you, leaves you a quarter hour at your mother's table, bolt the food, scald your mouth, turn around. Thousands do exactly that, every noon, at a dead trot. Whole neighbourhoods of this city empty and refill twice in an hour like a tide yanked by a brass moon, and thousands more give up the trip as impossible, and for them the answer is standing by the door, 2 quarts, wire bail, lid on tight. The pail, there it is, the gun from the Indiana lane, gone off at last. The farm wife's ambassador to the far field has become the standard equipment of the American working man, because the far field is now everywhere. The mill, the foundry, the mine, the yard. They call it a dinner pail, hold on to that name, it's evidence. Tin, 2 or 3 tiers in the fancy versions. Coffee down below where it can't slosh into the bread, meat and bread in the middle. Pie riding on top, because even in exile the American dinner refuses to travel without pie. At noon the whistle blows, the looms bang to a stop, and the silence. Everyone says this. The silence is a physical event. Your ears ring with it like a struck glass. and you sit on a wool bale in the weave room heat, or on the mill steps if the day allows, and you open the tin and eat cold dinner in the steam-smelling air with your hands still trembling slightly from 10,000 pick-and-throw repetitions. 20 minutes later, the whistle inhales and the looms take you back. Understand what has just happened historically on that wool bale. The midday meal, the anchor of Western eating since the Manor Hall, the sun-crowned, family-gathered, work-pausing dinner, has been reduced to cold food in a can, eaten alone, on the clock, inside the workplace. It kept the calories, it lost everything else. The table, the household, the hot centre, the sitting down. A meal that had been the day's cathedral is now the day's pit stop, and your body will not accept the demotion. A human being who works 11 hours and eats cold bread at noon comes home at 6:15 ravenous. Genuinely walk through the door, hollow to the ribs, hungry. And at home, for the first time all day, there is a stove, a table, a family, and time. So the big meal, the real cooking, the meat, the heat, the gathering, slides to evening. Not because anyone chose it, because it is the only slot left. The whistle didn't kill the great American dinner, it evicted it, and evening was the only room vacant. Watch it happen in your own kitchen, 1885. Your mother has the meat pie hot at 6:30 when the men and the girls come off the hill. It is unquestionably the biggest meal of the day now. Soup, the pie, potatoes, bread, tea, the noon pail long since demoted to bridge fuel. And notice what your mother calls the evening meal, supper. The old word, the soup word, still faithful. But notice what it has become under the old name, the main meal. The word and the meal have come apart, and in that gap, philology is about to have a 40-year argument that you can still hear echoes of at any American holiday table. Because the same migration is happening at the top of society, on a different schedule and for a different reason. And this, I'll flag honestly, is a place where historians describe a messy, class-striped, region-striped process, not a clean date. The urban rich moved dinner late first, and partly for fashion. In London, and then in New York, through the early and middle 1800s, the elegant dinner hour crawled from 2 o'clock to 4 to 6 to 7, each rising class eating a little later to prove it didn't answer to daylight. Candles, after all, had become something you could afford to burn socially. But under the fashion sat the same engine that ruled your mill. The man of the house now worked downtown. The merchant went to the counting house, the lawyer to his office, the broker to the exchange, and none of them could come home to a 2 o'clock dinner any more than you could climb the hill in 45 minutes. So the fine houses slid dinner to the evenings and kept the name. Dinner at 7, with courses and gaslight. And the farmhouse, where work never left home, changed nothing at all. Dinner stayed at noon, supper stayed at 6, exactly as it had been since Massachusetts 1750. And that split, right there, is the fossil record. And it is my favourite piece of evidence in this whole story, because you can still dig it up at any family reunion in America. Ask a room of Americans what the noon meal is called and what the evening meal is called, and watch the room divide. City people, coastal people, the young, lunch at noon, dinner at night. But somebody's grandmother from Iowa, somebody's uncle in Alabama, for them dinner is the noon meal, the big farm noon meal, and the evening meal is supper, and they are not confused. They are not old-fashioned. They are correct in the old coordinates. Rural America kept the agrarian clock decades longer because its work stayed home, and the words froze in place there like footprints in dried mud. Every dinner on the grounds, church picnic at noon, every Thanksgiving dinner served at 1 in the afternoon. Thanksgiving notice, the one day the whole country still eats its main meal at midday, because Thanksgiving is a farm meal preserved in national amber. All of it is the old system showing through the new paint. Linguists have actually mapped the dinner-supper line across the country the way geologists map a stratum. The whistle redrew America's meal times, and the map of the words is the map of where the whistle did and didn't reach. By the time you are old, weaver, and let's be honest, between us in the composite dark, mill lungs and mill hours being what they are, old may mean 50. The migration will be effectively complete in industrial America. Dinner, the word for the day's great meal, will have finished its 500-year slide from mid-morning in a manor hall to mid-evening in a rented triple-decker, drag the last 6 hours of its journey in a single century by steam. The 3-slot day is nearly built now. Quick breakfast before the whistle, cold pail at noon, big supper called dinner or dinner called supper at night. Nearly. But look at the middle slot. Cold bread in a tin can is not a meal. It's an apology for one. There is a hole in the middle of the American day, 10 million working stomachs wide, and it is 1885, and this is the United States of America, where a whole 10 million stomachs wide has another name, a market. So come to the cities and watch America invent lunch, not discover it. Invent it, the way you invent a machine part, to specification, to fit a gap of known dimensions, 1 hour or less, one worker, midday, cheap, fast, near the job. Even the word had to be repurposed. Luncheon had knocked around English for centuries as a vague, slightly foppish term for a bite between meals, and where the word originally came from, I'll tell you plainly, nobody is certain. The dictionaries themselves shrug, some pointing at lump, as in a lump of bread, others elsewhere. A meal so new to respectability that its own name has no reliable parents. Through the 19th century, luncheon was mostly what ladies and idlers did at midday while working men ate dinner. And then the whistle world needed a word for the new little meal in the middle of the workday, and luncheon got its coat taken in, lost a syllable to hurry, lunch, and was put to work. By the 1880s, the American city is saying lunch the way it says streetcar, as a word for a piece of urban machinery. You are a copying clerk now, 18 years old. Lower Manhattan, 1889, $40 a month. High collar, ink on your right cuff that will never fully wash out. And at 12:30, the office lets you go. For exactly 1 hour. Feel that hour the way a clerk feels it. It is not midday in the farm sense, a soft solar season of ringing bells and shade naps. It is 60 minutes, counted, with a manager's watch at the far end of it. And the moment you reach the street, you are inside one of the great unheralded choreographies of the modern world, the urban lunch rush. The sidewalks of the financial district go from passable to solid in 10 minutes. Every doorway is exhaling men. Everyone is walking at the same slightly indecent speed, because everyone is doing the same arithmetic you're doing, subtracting walking time and waiting time from eating time. And down at the bottom of every stairway and behind every steamed window, the city has grown a whole new anatomy of institutions that exist for 1 hour a day. The lunch counter. Give it a look because your century made it. A long slab of marble or varnished oak with a row of round stools bolted to the floor. Bolted so they can't be dragged, so the seating stays dense, so the turnover holds. And behind it a counterman working with the speed of a stage magician dealing cards. No tablecloth, no ceremony, no second act. You eat with your hat on. You eat elbow to elbow with strangers. You eat in 12 minutes and you leave, because the stool itself is designed to be slightly too small for lingering, and the man standing behind you with his watch in his hand is your replacement. The bill of fare runs to speed. Pie, always pie. The fossil rides again, dinner's pie still faithful to the working American at noon, coffee, beans, corned beef, sandwiches, and there's a word to stop on. The sandwich, bread as packaging, the entire meal engineered into a hand. The story everyone tells, that it's named for the Earl of Sandwich, who in 1762 wouldn't leave his gaming table and called for beef between bread, is, I should say, honestly, an anecdote from the period rather than a documented certainty. The name is real. The Earl is real. The card table scene comes from a contemporary's gossipy account. But whatever its birth certificate says, the sandwich is the perfect food for the whistle world. A meal with no fixed location, no cutlery, no pause, and the American city of the 1880s and 90s takes it up the way it took up the telegraph. There are men getting rich on ham sandwiches. There is, by century's end, an entire sandwich economy. Pushcarts, counter stacks under glass domes, wax paper, the works. And the pressure keeps selecting for speed, and speed produces marvels. In 1885, up near the Stock Exchange, a place called the Exchange Buffet opens with an idea so radical it sounds like a joke. No waiters at all. You walk in, men only, standing room, mustard-coloured haste. Serve yourself from the counter, eat standing at a shelf, tot up your own bill, and announce to the cashier on your way out what you owe. An honour system restaurant in the financial district of all places, and it works. It turns a profit for decades. The waiter, you see, had become the bottleneck, the last slow human in the loop, and the American lunch hour was now an environment that hunted slowness the way winter hunts the sick. Which brings us to Philadelphia, June of 1902, and the most beautiful machine this story owns. At 818 Chestnut Street, two caterers named Joseph Horn and Frank Hardart opened the first American automat, with imported German machinery behind the walls, and I want you to walk in on its opening summer with your nickel, because people who were children then remembered it for the rest of their lives the way other children remember a first circus. A long room glittering like a bank crossed with a jewel case. Marble, mirrors, and a wall of little glass-fronted compartments, dozens and dozens of them, brass-framed, each one a tiny lit theatre holding a single sandwich, a wedge of pie, a dish of beans. You drop a nickel in the slot beside the window, you turn the knob, the bolt gives, a small, deeply satisfying clunk. The glass door swings open on its hinge, and you lift out your dish. And behind the wall, this is the part the marble is politely lying about, there is no machine cooking anything. There are people, cooks and runners moving at lunch rush speed, refilling every emptied compartment from behind within seconds, a human engine wearing a chrome mask. The automat is lunch's cathedral, and its confession in one building. Food with the friction of human contact machined out of it entirely, no waiter, no small talk, no tipping, no judgment either. The same nickel, the same window, whether your coat is good or shabby. New York gets its own automat in Times Square in 1912, and for half a century the nickel in the slot lunch will feed office America by the hundreds of millions of plates. Now stack the pieces, because the middle of the American day has just hardened into architecture. The factory fixed the noon break with its whistle. The office copied it with the 1 hour lunch, and notice that no natural law says lunch lives at 12. It lives at 12 because the workday was built symmetric around it. because the factory dinner gap sat at noon where the old farm dinner had been, and the offices inherited the slot. The city then built a physical apparatus, counters, buffets, automats, sandwich carts, tuned to exactly that hour, which locked the hour in place with real estate and payrolls. By the early 20th century, the lunch hour, a phrase that would have meant nothing to the man with the hoe, is one of the fixed joints of American time. Noon to 1, a synchronized, continent-wide, secular observance. 12 o'clock stopped being the sun's hour, or dinner's hour. It became lunch's hour, the little invented meal squatting, if you think about it, in the exact throne the great dinner was evicted from, wearing its noon crown, 1/10 its size. And while the middle of the day was being machined, the front of the day was being compressed, because the same city that couldn't send you home at noon also, now, wouldn't let you start slow. Come to the front of the day for a moment. This stop is short, but the shrinkage is the point. The farm morning had no deadline. Chores, then food, then fields, all within one dooryard, the sequence mattering more than the minute. But the industrial and then the commuting city put a hard wall at the front of the morning, the whistle, the office bell, and soon something new, the timetable of the 7:42. Because by the 1890s and 1900s, the man of the middling classes doesn't just work away from home. He lives away from work, out along the streetcar lines and the commuter rails, in the new rings of houses that exist precisely because the trains do. And a man whose day starts when a train leaves, not when his body wakes, not when his chores end, but at 7:42, an external, printed, unforgiving minute, needs a breakfast that fits in the gap between waking and walking to the station. The vast farm breakfast that stunned European visitors, the steaks, the fried potatoes, the 3 kinds of hot bread, do not fit in that gap, and the heavy fried morning was already under fire from a noisy new tribe of digestion reformers besides. What fits is speed. Something poured, not cooked. An American industry, which had just invented lunch, promptly invented that too. The box of cereal on the kitchen table, a story of sanitariums, showmen, and Battle Creek, Michigan. Strange enough that this channel gives it its own night. For tonight, just take the timing. Breakfast, the last unscheduled meal in America, got a fixed hour the same way its siblings did, not by decree, but by deadline. The commuter's breakfast is eaten at 7:15 because the train leaves at 7:42. One more meal pinned to the board. That makes 3. 3 meals at 3 fixed hours, and no one ever having decided it. But fixed hours only work if the hours themselves agree. And here, right here, the story opens out into its strangest chapter, the one I promised you at the start. Because all of this synchronization, whistles, timetables, lunch counters, the 7:42, has been built on top of a foundation that is quietly insane, and in 1883 the men who run the railroad finally lose patience with it. The foundation is the sun, and on a grey Sunday in November, they fire it. Let me lay out the insanity first so you can enjoy the cure. Until November of 1883, the United States has no such thing as standard time. None. Every town keeps its own. Real solar time, the noon mark kind. The sun over this particular courthouse kind. Which means the country is carpeted with hundreds upon hundreds of local times, each one correct for its own meridian and useless 50 miles away. When it's 12 o'clock noon in Chicago, it is 12:31 in Pittsburgh, 12:24 in Cleveland, 12:17 in Toledo, 11:50 in St. Louis. Every city's clock set to its own sky. Washington and Baltimore, 40 miles apart, disagree by a couple of minutes and are both right. This was never a problem for the farm. The hired girl's windowsill didn't need to agree with Boston, remember. Nobody's noon needed to agree with anybody's. And for 4,000 years of human timekeeping, it was simply what time was. Local. Solar. True. Then came the railroads, and the railroads made it lethal. A railroad is two trains on one track believing two different clocks. Every railroad company ran on its own operating time, typically the local time of its headquarters city. So a busy junction lived under several official times at once. In the Pittsburgh station, they said, you could stand under 6 clocks showing 6 different railroad times, none of them the city's own. Union stations posted columns of arithmetic so passengers could convert one company's 2:15 into another company's 2:03. Schedules were a translation exercise. Missed connections were routine. And worse than missed connections, there were collisions. Trains keeping honest time by different suns, meeting on the same rails. The men who ran the system spent years being quietly driven mad by this. And the man at the centre of the fix was a railway engineer and timetable editor named William Allen, secretary of the railroad's General Time Convention, who spent years of his life on a single idea. Throw away the hundreds of local times and cut the continent into 4 great slabs. Eastern, Central, Mountain, Pacific. Each slab 1 hour apart, every clock inside a slab identical. Not sun time, not town time, railroad standard time held together by telegraph, and the railroad simply did it. Mark this, because it's the signature move of our whole story. No law was passed. Congress did not vote. No president proclaimed. The Standard Time Act making it federal law is 35 years away, in 1918. In 1883, the railroad corporations agreed among themselves, set a date, and informed the nation, with some grumbling and a few holdout towns, and at least one editor thundering about defying the laws of God and nature, largely shrugged and reset its watches. The private schedule outvoted the public sun, and it wasn't even close. The date was Sunday, November 18th, 1883. They chose noon for the changeover, of course they did. Noon, the meal-worn, monk-dragged hour, called up one last time for duty, and they chose Sunday because the traffic was lightest. And here is how it went, in the place where I want you to stand. You're in a jeweller's shop this time, because jewellers sold and set watches, jewellers received the time signals, and on this particular Sunday, the jewellers of America are the priests of the transition. Say it's Philadelphia again. The city suits us. Grey November, light through the shop glass. The showcases smell of chamois and machine oil and silver polish. The jeweller is an old man with a loop groove worn permanently into one eye socket, and the shop is full, genuinely full. People have come out after church and stayed, standing along the counters in their Sunday coats, come to watch the time change the way people gather for an eclipse. Hung along the back wall, the regulators, the fine, tall, dead-accurate pendulum clocks that hold the shop's authority, and on the counter, connected by wire to everything that matters, the telegraph sounder. A little brass insect that speaks in clicks from the Naval Observatory in Washington, where astronomers clock the actual stars. Here is what the room is waiting for. At local noon, Philadelphia's own true sun noon, the clocks will be corrected to the new Eastern Standard, a shift, for this city, of a handful of minutes. In New York, the clocks go back not quite 4 minutes. In Boston, sitting east of the new standard meridian, they go back a full 16. All across each zone, every city is sliding by its own peculiar offset onto the common hour, and in every city where the clocks move backward, something wonderful and never to be repeated occurs. Noon happens twice. The sun crosses the meridian. Noon number 1, the true one, the windowsill one, 4,000 years old. And then the clocks are set back, and a few minutes later the hands climb up and strike 12 again. Noon number 2, the invented one, the railroads. The newspapers, delighted, have already named it the day of 2 noons. The sounder begins to click. The shop goes quiet in that particular way a crowd goes quiet. A rustle, a hush spreading outward, a child hoisted onto a shoulder. The jeweller stands at his regulator with his hand raised, listening to Washington spell out the seconds. Through the front window, thin November sun lies along the floorboards, and if the sill of that window carried a scratch, and you know now what such scratches were, you watched one being obeyed in 1750. The shadow is touching it right about now, faithful as ever, announcing the only noon it knows. Last call. The clicks run out their string. The final signal falls. And the old man stops the pendulum, moves the minute hand back and lets it swing again. That's all. That's the whole spectacle. An old man touching a clock hand in a quiet shop, multiplied by 10,000 shops, stations, church towers and city halls across a continent. Somebody in the crowd laughs, somebody claps. A man near the door makes the joke every town makes today, that he's aged backward, that he'll take his extra minutes in cash. And the crowd spills out into the street to compare watches, and the church bells that ring the new noon a few minutes after the sun's noon ring it without apparent embarrassment. No riot, no thunderclap. The Republic has just transferred custody of noon. Of noon, the dinner hour of the whole agrarian world, the anchor your every meal once swung from, out of the sky and into a committee, and it goes down easier than a change in postage rates. But stand a moment in the emptying shop because the jeweller has our lesson, and he delivers it while resetting the watches left on his counter, one by one, without looking up. Somebody's apprentice asks him, Ernest, 17, the kind of boy who asks, whether the new time isn't false time, seeing as the sun doesn't keep it. And the old man screws the loop out of his eye and says, Son, the sun never kept time for you either. The bell kept it, and the bell lied whenever it pleased. All we've done is agree which lie to tell together. He holds a watch to his ear a moment, listening for the beat, and then, quietly, the line to carry out of the whole chapter. From now on, dinner's whenever the wire says it is, and the wire don't get hungry. He's right, and the proof is already in your pocket. The peddler's watch, the brass one the Indiana farmer waved away with. What for? I've got a bell. Fires now at last, its long fuse burnt down through 45 years. Because once time is standard, time can be enforced, and the watch stops being a peddler's toy and becomes an instrument of command. Within a decade, the railroads, after a terrible wreck in Ohio, blamed on a watch that stopped for 4 minutes, will impose formal watch standards on every man who touches a train. Certified movements, inspected on schedule, accuracy to within seconds a week. The commanded watch, the inspected watch, the watch you answer to. And what the railroad requires today, the factory requires tomorrow. Time clocks appear at the mill gates in the 1890s. Punch in, punch out, the card stamped to the minute. And the foreman's watch and the office clock and the schoolmaster's clock all now agree with each other perfectly, wired together. One time, everywhere, no appeal. The farmer had a bell, and the bell had a wife's hand on the rope, and there was mercy in it. The rope could wait 5 minutes for a finished furrow. The wire has no hand and no mercy and no 5 minutes. From November 18th, 1883, every whistle in America blows at the same instant inside its zone. The synchronization is complete, the grid is live, and every fixed mealtime in this country now runs on it. Your noon lunch is the railroad's noon. It has been since that Sunday. The sun, which decided every dinner hour from the Manor to the Corn Row, was retired by telegram, and the windowsill scratch became what it is today. A curiosity for antiquarians, a thin straight line on old sills that most owners no longer even recognize. The fossil of the sky's authority over your stomach. Now the grid needs enforcers, keepers, drill masters, because a standard hour is only a number until institutions make bodies obey it. And the Republic, as it happens, has been building the perfect drill hall all along, and filling it with the one population that can be trained to anything. Children. Think about what school actually teaches, underneath what school teaches. Since Horace Mann and the Common School Crusaders of the 1830s and 40s, America has been gathering its children into graded rooms, and by the end of the century the cities have made attendance compulsory, and the school day has hardened into a timetable. And the timetable is the curriculum. A child who attends an American school in 1900 is drilled 5 days a week in the following invisible subjects. Work begins at a bell, not when you're ready. Work stops at a bell, not when you're finished. And food happens at a bell. At the noon hour, the school's little copy of the factory's dinner gap, and at no other time. And eating outside the appointed hour is an offence with the name. Watch a 7-year-old in a city classroom that year. A boy with the tin pail of his own now. The dinner pail is bread. There are child-sized ones, and in a few decades they'll be stamped with cowboys and rocket ships and called lunch boxes, the old word fully evicted even from the tin. Watch him at 11:40 hungry, eyeing the pail under his bench. He knows better than to open it. 20 more minutes. He is 7 years old, and he is learning in his stomach, where his grandfather learned it from a mill whistle at 25 and his great-grandfather never learned it at all, that hunger is not an instruction. Hunger is a feeling. The bell is an instruction. Whatever else that classroom produces, it produces this. A citizen for whom eating by the clock feels like nature itself. Run that drill on every American child for 3 generations, and the 3-meal schedule no longer needs enforcing at all. It gets enforced from inside, and school did one more quiet thing to the national stomach. It standardized the children's noon, which dragged at the mother's noon, which meant that even households with no factory worker in them, the widow's house, the parson's house, the farm wife in town, found their middays bent around an institutional bell. By the early 20th century, the reformers are building lunch itself into the school's machinery. Penny lunch programs in the big cities, hot food ladled at noon to immigrant children, the beginnings of what will become, in 1946, the National School Lunch Act, the federal government of the United States formally in the business of serving a fixed meal at a fixed hour to millions of children, which is about as decided as an hour can get. Nobody who voted for it was thinking, we hereby ratify the whistle schedule. But that's what it was. The state had adopted industrial noon and was now feeding it to 6-year-olds on trays. Meanwhile, the adults were fighting over the other end of the clock. And here the story earned some respect because so far every hour in it was imposed. And now, for once, hours get fought for. The men and women inside the whistle world did not accept its arithmetic quietly. The demand rises through the whole late 19th century in strikes and marches and songs, and it is worth hearing how they phrased it, because they phrased it in hours. 8 hours for work, 8 hours for rest, 8 hours for what we will. That's an actual anthem written in 1866, sung at rallies for decades. Not shorter days, 8 hours, an exact number, because the workers had learned the new language too. You cannot bargain with a whistle in anything but minutes. And bargain they did, bitterly for generations. The 8-hour campaigns of 1886, the great strikes, the blood that got spilled in the streets over the length of a working day. And I'll leave the blood at the edge of the frame tonight because this is still a bedtime, but know that it's there. Know that people died in America in the arguing over these numbers. What matters for our story is what the survivors wrote down. Because when unions finally got contracts, and through the 1910s, the 20s, the great organising waves of the 1930s, they got them by the thousands. The meal hour went into the text. Clauses, actual numbered clauses in signed agreements. The lunch period, its length, 30 minutes or 60, whether paid or unpaid, when it falls in the shift. Penalties if it's shorted or moved. Read a stack of American labour contracts from those decades, and you can watch the midday meal, which the manor took for granted, which the sun once scheduled for free, being purchased back minute by minute in writing at the price of strikes. The whistle had stolen dinner wholesale. The unions bought back a lunch break retail and nailed it to the noon hour in ink. And in 1938 the last big piece slides home, the Fair Labour Standards Act, federal law at last, the 40-hour week, 8 hours, 5 days, overtime beyond, which pours the national workday into a fixed concrete mould, 9 to 5-ish, Monday to Friday. And a nation whose work runs 9 to 5 is a nation whose meals must run before, amid, and after 7, noon, 6. The law never mentions dinner. It didn't have to. Fix the workday, and the meal times crystallise around it like frost around a wire. So count the enforcers now, all of them on duty by the late 1930s, all synchronized to the railroad's wire. The whistle at the plant, the time clock at the gate, the school bell over the children, the lunch clause in the contract, the timetable at the station, the statute over the whole week. Somewhere under all of it, faint but audible if you put your ear to the ground of the culture, the farm wife's bell on the locust post, still ringing noon dinner in the counties the whistle never reached. Dinner and supper, the old words, holding their ground in the rural South and Midwest like veterans who never surrendered. The machine is complete. All it lacks is a face, a family, a kitchen, a table where the Finnish system can sit down and call itself normal and be photographed and be remembered ever after as the way Americans have always eaten. That table gets built after the war in the suburbs, and it is served at 6 o'clock sharp. Come meet it. This is the last stop before we put the whole question to bed. Levittown, or any of its 10,000 siblings, a June evening, 1956. You're 12 now. Let's make you 12. It's the right altitude for this kitchen. Bike on the lawn, ball game on the radio in the garage, the street full of identical lawns going gold in the long light. And through the screen door, the sound and the smell of the system at its zenith. Your mother at a white enamelled electric range, pot roast, potatoes, green beans that were flash frozen 8 months ago and will taste like June anyway, miracle of the age, and on the wall above the bread box, a clock, an electric kitchen clock the colour of mint ice cream, humming to itself, synchronized through the power grid's own frequency to everything else in America. Look at the clock and understand what it is. The last bell. The church tower became the farm bell, became the whistle, became the school bell, and here the lineage ends, softened and domesticated, wearing pastel enamel, hanging above the toaster. It doesn't need to be loud anymore. It won. Nobody in this house has ever eaten against its wishes in their lives. At 6 o'clock, 6, the great compromise hour, late enough for the commute, early enough for the children, the hour the whole century of migration finally settled on, the system performs itself. Your father's Ford turns into the driveway off the 5:40 train, and I want you to notice what his arrival is. It's the whistle, inverted. His great-grandfather walked out of the house at noon toward a bell. He walks into the house at 6 away from 1, and dinner has tracked him the whole way. Meal and man tied together by a string the length of a workday, and where the workday's far end came to rest, there dinner came to rest. The table is set. Set matters, placemats, the good glasses, the props of a meal that knows it's an institution. Grace, maybe. Meat, starch, vegetable, bread and butter, milk for the kids, the plate arranged like a little flag of the whole civilization. Around the table, the family, all of it, present and accounted for, because the 6 o'clock dinner is now understood. By the magazines, by the churches, by the guidance counsellors, by your mother with a firmness that brooks no argument, as the very hearthstone of American family life, the daily proof that the household holds. Miss it without a reason, and you'll hear about it. And your grandmother, who is visiting from her farm in Iowa this month. The old coordinates walk into the scene on their own 2 feet. Sits down at 6 with everyone else, perfectly content, and calls the meal supper. Nobody corrects her. She looks at the pot roast, the frozen June beans, the mint-coloured clock. This whole tidy machine her century built, and delivers, without knowing it, the last teacher line of the night. Back home, she says, we ate like this at noon, and then she picks up her fork, because supper's supper whenever they hold it. Stay at that table a minute longer, because the 1950s is the decade when the schedule stops being a schedule and becomes a story America tells about itself. Every institution now sings the same 3 notes in harmony. The breakfast tableau, first, 7:15 in that same kitchen, and it is pure choreography. Percolator chugging its little heartbeat on the counter, toast sailing up, juice in small ritual glasses, cereal for the kids poured not cooked, your father with one eye on the mint green clock, because the 7:42 is still the 7:42, 20 minutes of synchronized intake engineered to fit exactly in the slot between waking and timetable. Then the noon note. He'll eat lunch at midtown counters or in the company cafeteria, and the cafeterias themselves are a wartime inheritance. The war plants of the 1940s fed shift workers by the hundreds of thousands at fixed hours, in-house, on trays, and the post-war corporation kept the model, while his children eat at noon in a school lunchroom partly underwritten since 1946 by the federal government itself. Even the pauses have been formalized now. The coffee break, and I love this detail because you can practically watch the ink dry on it, enters the American language in the early 1950s, pushed along by an actual advertising campaign from the coffee industry. Give yourself a coffee break, and then marches straight into union contracts as a negotiated, timed, named institution. 10 minutes, mid-morning, mid-afternoon. Think about what that means. By 1955, not only are the 3 meals fixed, the spaces between the meals have official names and bargain durations. The American day has been surveyed down to the last hungry minute, fenced and posted, and then in 1954 comes the object that tells you the system has achieved total self-awareness. A Swanson executive staring, so the company's own legend runs, and I give it to you as company legend, the way rule-keeping requires. At a mountain of unsold Thanksgiving turkey, orders it portioned into segmented aluminum trays, frozen and sold for 98 cents under the most honest product name of the century. The TV dinner, not TV food, not TV meal in general. TV dinner, the evening slot itself, the whistle's own child, the 6 o'clock institution, now available frozen, because the institution had become so solid, so universally understood, that you could sell an aluminum replica of it. Millions move in the first year. You don't get to sell a replica of something until everyone agrees on what it looks like. That tray, turkey here, peas there, potatoes in the corner, is the schedule's portrait, done in aluminum, suitable for framing. Notice too what Sunday is doing in this same house, because Sunday is where the whole story quietly admits everything. On Sunday there is no commute, no whistle, no 7:42. The industrial reasons for the industrial schedule all take the day off. And what does the family do? It reverts. Sunday dinner is served in the early afternoon, 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock. The biggest cooking of the week, the roast, the table extended, the agrarian pattern, the noon dinner world, resurrected every 7th day like a law of nature, reasserting itself the moment the whistle's grip loosens. Nobody plans this as historical reenactment. It's just what a proper dinner feels like when time is free, and what it feels like turns out to be 1838. The old system never died, you see. It's in the culture's muscle memory, coming out on Sundays and Thanksgiving, the way a retired bell horse, they used to say, would still lean toward the barn at noon. So there it stands, roughly 70 years ago now, the finished cathedral. 3 meals, 3 fixed hours, call it 7, noon, and 6, observed from Bangor to San Diego, with a unanimity no church ever achieved, policed by no one, obeyed by everyone, and already, by 1956, believed by nearly all its adherents to be ancient, natural, and self-evidently correct. The whole apparatus, whistle, wire, school bell, lunch clause, timetable, statute, percolator, has vanished into the walls like the cooks behind the automate's little brass windows. All anyone sees is the marble front, breakfast, lunch, dinner, the way people eat, the way people, it goes without saying, have always eaten. Except you've been to the manor, so you know better. And now, the plates are cleared, the radio's down low, the street outside the screen door has gone blue with evening. Now we can finally sit with the question we started with and answer it properly. And I think you'll find the answer's been assembling itself in your hands all night like something you were building without looking at it. Who decided that Americans eat 3 meals a day, and who set the hours? Line up the suspects one last time, in order of appearance. The medieval world handed America a 2-pole pattern, big dinner amidships, light supper at dusk, breakfast and apology, with morning eating morally suspect and every hour set by sun and bell. The farm kept that pattern healthy for 200 years because work lived at home. The noon dinner was the sun's meal, the bell's meal. The whole household gathered at the day's bright centre. Then the factory, the first and greatest of the deciders, moved work away from the kitchen. And that single fact, multiplied by 50 million lives, did most of what people assume some committee did. The whistle shrank noon dinner into a tin pail. The evening, The only slot left with a stove and a family in it inherited the main meal, and dinner, the word followed the main meal to nightfall, while supper stayed behind in the countryside as evidence. The city then invented lunch to fill the hole the whistle tore, invented it as infrastructure counters and automats and sandwich carts, and in doing so nailed the little meal to the noon hour with real estate. The commuter railroad compressed breakfast against the timetable, and industry filled the shortened slot with something pourable. The railroads, as deciders again twice over, abolished the sun itself in 1883, one Sunday noon, 2 noons for the price of one, so that every whistle and school bell in a quarter of the continent could strike in unison. The schools drilled each new generation of stomachs to the bell until obedience felt like appetite. The unions, bless them, fought the clock's owners to a truce and wrote the meal hours into contracts. The only chapter of this story where the hours were chosen by the people who had to live them. The government poured the workday into law in 1938 and adopted the children's noon meal outright in 1946. And the suburbs assembled the finished pieces around a kitchen table at 6 o'clock and called the result tradition. That's the answer. Nobody decided, and everybody did. There was never a meeting. There was a century and a half of accumulating machinery, each piece solving its own local problem. A mill owner wanting his looms attended, a railroad wanting its trains uncollided, a school board wanting order in the halls, a union wanting its members fed, a coffee lobby wanting a verb, and the schedule is simply the shape the human day took after all that machinery pressed on it from every side at once. 3 meals at fixed hours is not ancient wisdom, and it is not anybody's plot. It is industrialization's table manners. It is what eating looks like after the clock wins. The factory whistle moved dinner. The lunch counter built noon. The railroad clock synchronized the whole board. The commute squeezed breakfast. And the family table at 6 o'clock. The warmest thing in the whole machine, the thing that feels most eternal, most human, most yours, is, in its timing, the precise negative image of a workday whose length was set by strikes and statutes. The meal that happens when the whistle finally lets everyone go home. And if part of you wants to object, wait, but it feels natural. I get hungry at noon. I get hungry at 6. Then here is the gentlest revelation of the night, the one to carry down into sleep. You do get hungry at those hours, genuinely, measurably, because appetite is trainable, and yours was trained, is trained daily from the school bell onward, until the schedule got up under your ribs and started issuing its instructions from inside. The researchers who study meal timing find little in human biology that demands 3 meals at these particular hours. They find instead that bodies anticipate whatever schedule they're kept on, warming up the machinery of hunger in advance of the accustomed hour, like a station master lighting lamps before the evening train. Your noon hunger is real. It is also, in the deepest sense, a railroad timetable that learned to speak through your stomach. You are right now, lying in the dark, carrying inside your own body the last working copy of the whistle, the bell and the wire, and it will go off tomorrow at noon, faithful as bronze, whether or not any whistle in America still blows. Before the lights go all the way down, let me settle the ledger, because I promised at the start to keep the accounts clean, and a story about invisible authority had better not become one. Here is what stands on documents solid enough to lean on. The medieval main meal sat in the middle of the day, and the moralist's suspicion of eating too soon, prépropéré, first face of gluttony, is right there in the theology, Gregory to Aquinas, in black and white. The colonial and farm pattern, big noon dinner, light supper, work and breakfast, is thick in diaries, travellers' accounts, household manuals. The dinner bells and horns and noon marks are real objects you can hold, and collectors do. The mill timetables survive, printed bells to the minute schedules from the Lowell corporations, and the shrunken noon interval is in them, 30 minutes, 45 in period type. The Exchange buffet opened by the Stock Exchange in 1885, honour system and all. Horn and Hardart opened the first American automat at 818 Chestnut Street in 1902. The first New York automat followed in Times Square in 1912. Those are dates with paperwork. November 18th, 1883, the day of two noons, is among the best documented Sundays of the 19th century. The newspapers covered it like a coronation, offsets printed to the second. And the Standard Time Act of 1918, the Fair Labour Standards Act of 1938, the National School Lunch Act of 1946, the Union Meal Clauses, the 8 Hours Anthem of 1866, the 98-cent TV dinner of 1954, all matters of record. And the Great Migration itself, dinner sliding from midday to evening across the 19th century, class by class, region by region, with supper at noon country holding out longest. That is standard food scholarship, mapped in dialect surveys and cookbooks and etiquette manuals across 100 years. And here is what stands softer, and I'd rather you hear it from me than from a comment section. Exactly how early, how uniform and how meagre the medieval pattern was, argued. The sources skew toward the households that could afford scribes, and the ploughman's actual crust is mostly inferred. The Hungry Monk's theory of noon's 3-hour slide, suspected, likely, unproven. The Earl of Sandwich at his gaming table, a contemporary's anecdote, not a court record. The Swanson turkey surplus origin story, company legend cheerfully told by the company. The tidy sequence I gave you, whistle, then lunch, then wire, then law, is tidier than the past ever is. These things overlapped and backslid and varied by city, by trade, by kitchen, and food. Historians will spend careers on the fine grain of it, and should. The spine of the story holds. The joints have play in them. A channel that tells you otherwise about any history is selling something, and it isn't sleep. As for the fates, and every story owes its objects their fates, the record supplies them, and there's a strange tenderness in the pile. The factory whistles fell silent by degrees through the late 20th century, as the mills closed or the noise ordinances came. Here and there a town kept one blowing at noon out of pure affection, a civic heartbeat nobody could bear to stop. And if you've ever been in a small American town at 12 sharp and heard it, you've heard the 19th century clearing its throat. The automats faded after mid-century, done in by fast food and changing streets. The last one in New York shut its little brass windows for good in 1991, and people wept in print about nickels and lemon meringue. And pieces of the great machine walls sit in museums now, including the Smithsonian, the marble mask of lunch, preserved like a temple frieze, which is exactly what it is. The Exchange buffet, the honour system miracle, lasted into the 1960s before the arithmetic finally failed. The farm dinner bells came down off their posts by the thousands and went to auctions and antique barns, where they hang today, priced like folk art, silent, though not all of them. Some farmhouse somewhere rang one tonight, calling grandchildren in from the yard, and the sound is unchanged because bronze doesn't know what century it's in. The railroad watches became heirlooms, handed down with the dead conductor's name engraved in the case back. The word supper is receding on the dialect maps decade by decade, the old isogloss dissolving as the last generations of the noon dinner world pass. Linguists are literally recording it out of existence. Farewell interviews with a meal, and the noon marks are still there. That's the fate I like best. On the sills of surviving colonial houses, under 250 years of paint, the scratches are still there, still accurate, still touching the window frame shadow at local apparent noon every clear day, announcing true solar dinner time to kitchens that no longer understand the message. The sun never stops sending it. We just change the address, and the people, the documented ones met, documented ends. William F. Allen, the timetable editor who cut the continent into 4 clean slabs, lived to see his railroad time become federal law in 1918, and is remembered, in the small way engineers are remembered, as the man who standardized American time. His papers are archived, his convention minutes survive, students of the subject still cite him. Horn and hard art are buried under their own famous name. The union negotiators left their signatures on the contracts, and the contracts are in the labor archives, meal clauses and all. But the ones I borrowed your eyes from tonight, the ploughboy, the hired girl, the man in the corn row, the weaver on the wool bale, the clerk with his nickel, the boy with the pail under the school bench, the 12-year-old at the 6 o'clock table, those were composites. I told you so at the start, and I won't insult them now by inventing them tombstones. Whoever their originals were, and there were millions of originals, history closed over them the way noon closes over a morning, completely, and without keeping minutes. We know what their hours were. That, at least, this whole strange story guarantees. Whatever else is lost, we always know exactly when they ate. There's one more turn to the story, and it's happening now, and it belongs to you, so it should be told at a whisper. The cathedral is softening, has been for decades. The researchers who log what Americans actually swallow find the 3 neat meals blurring at the edges, snacks filling the old fenced-off spaces, breakfast skipped by millions, lunch eaten alone at desks, the shared 6 o'clock table thinning as shifts and screens and schedules pull the household apart into separate orbits. And the deepest force of all is the same one that built the system, now running in reverse. Work is moving again. The whistle gathered work away from home, and the schedule followed it. Now, for a growing share of the country, work has drifted back into the kitchen. It left a century and a half ago, the laptop where the loom was, and meal times, unsupervised, are already going soft and personal and sunless and strange, the way they were before the bell got organized. Nobody is deciding this either. Nobody ever decides. The machinery moves, and the meals move after it, the way they always have, the way they did when the monks dragged noon down the afternoon, when the whistle carried dinner into the dark. Your grandchildren may eat on a schedule as foreign to you as yours would be to the hired girl at her noon mark, and they too will be certain their way is the natural one, the ancient one, the way people have always eaten. Let them be certain. Certainty about dinner is one of the ways a civilization keeps itself warm. But that's tomorrow's history, and tomorrow's historians can lose sleep over it. Not you. Your part of the ledger is closed. So let's do now what the whole day of this whole story was always bending toward. The looms have banged to a stop, and there's that silence again. The struck glass silence after the whistle. ringing softly in your ears. The counter stools are empty and the coffee urns are cooling. The last train has left the last platform on time to the second, and the signal towers are dark. The schoolyard bell hangs still. Somewhere the supper dishes are done and the pot is scraped and soaking, and the mint-green clock above the bread box hums to itself in an empty kitchen, keeping perfect time for no one. The whole vast apparatus of American hours, a century and a half of whistles and wires and clauses and timetables, all of it built, every bolt of it to get everybody fed and back to work, has performed its very last office of the day, which was always, if you look at it kindly, its first purpose too. It has brought you home, and it has fed you, and now it has nothing left to ask of you until morning. You are off the clock. Do you feel what that means here at the bottom of the evening? Every bell in this story has stopped. For the next 8 hours, 8 hours for rest. You're spending right now the exact hours those marchers sang for and won. Not one institution in America has any claim on your body. No whistle owns your noon tonight. No timetable owns your waking. This hour, this dark, this bed. This is the part of the day they never managed to schedule, the last unfenced country, and you are lying in the middle of it with nowhere to be. So let's walk home the long way, backward, down through the whole story one more time, era by era, but gently now. No more arguments, no more evidence, nothing left to prove. Just the rooms themselves, one after another, each one a little earlier, a little darker, a little quieter than the last, the way the houses get older as you walk toward the centre of an old town. This is how the story wants to be left, in reverse, unwinding, the clock running backward toward the sun. Start where we ended, in the Levittown kitchen, but late now, past 10. The dishes are in the rack. The television murmurs its blue murmur in the next room, and your mother is wiping the counter in slow circles. The day's last chore, and the mint-green clock hums above the bread box. But you're 12 and half asleep on the stairs, and from the stairs the hum sounds almost like a purr, almost like the house itself breathing. The pot roast smell is still in the curtains. It will still be there in the morning, faint, folded in with percolator ghosts and 40 years of toast. The smell every one of those houses had. The smell of kept hours. 6 o'clock came and was obeyed and is gone, and it will come again tomorrow, soft as a habit, and nobody in this house will ever once think of it as the far end of a factory whistle. Let them sleep, let the clock hum. Walk backward out of the kitchen, out through the screen door that closes on its spring behind you. 2 soft sounds, tap and tap, and into the dark, and when your foot comes down off the porch step, it comes down 50 years earlier, on marble. The automat after closing. The great room on Chestnut Street with the lights half down, the mirrors resting from their long day of multiplying strangers. A man in an apron is polishing the brass around the little windows, window after window after window, each pane wearing its small handwritten card. Pie, beans, sandwiches, all the compartments empty now, all the doors ajar, a wall of tiny glass rooms with nothing left to sell. Behind the wall, the kitchen is dark. The cooks went home hours ago, hung their aprons on the same hooks in the same order, and walked out into the 8 hours that belonged to them. The nickel slots are quiet. If you put your ear against the marble, the man in the apron does it sometimes, though he'd never admit it. You can hear the building tick as it cools, a big fed animal settling. Somewhere uptown a counterman is stacking the bolted stools with their legs in the air, and the urns are drained, and the whole 1-hour city of lunch is folded up and put away until noon calls it back into being. It only ever existed for an hour at a time anyway. That was always the trick of it. A city that appears when the bells ring and vanishes when they stop. And the bells have stopped. Walk backward through the plate glass, backward down Chestnut Street, and the street lamps dim from electric to gas as you go, and the pavement roughens to cobble under your feet, and the year peels back to 1883, and it is a Sunday night in November. The jeweller's shop is closed. The crowd from the day of 2 noons is long dispersed to its suppers. The joke about aging backward has been made at 1,000 dinner tables and is already wearing out. In the dark shop, the regulators tick along the back wall. Steady, synchronized now, all of them agreeing with Washington to the second, keeping the brand new invented time through their first night on duty as if they'd never kept any other. The telegraph sounder sits silent on the counter, his little brass insect asleep. And outside, above the shop, above the gas lamps, the actual sky goes about its old business, the stars wheeling at the exact pace they have always wheeled, the real noon already on its way around the planet, sliding across the Pacific dark toward tomorrow, entirely unbothered about its retirement. The sun never argued, you notice. It never needed the job. It keeps the true time still, every clear day, for free for the sills and the sundials and anyone who cares to look up. The most patient of all the deposed kings, sending noon to the old address forever. Walk backward out of Philadelphia, backward along the rails. Feel them under your feet, the long steel argument that started everything quiet now, cooling in the dark, carrying nothing but frost for 300 miles, and step off the roadbed into snow, and the snow is Massachusetts, and the year is 1885 again, and it's evening in Fall River. The mills stand black against a paler black, 6 stories of windows with the fires banked low behind them, and the day's last shift is long home. In the triple-decker on the hill, the supper dishes are washed and the stove is ticking itself cool, and the weaver, you once tonight, is asleep already, dead asleep, 11 hours of looms in every joint, and by the door, ready, stands the tin pail, packed tonight for tomorrow, bread below, meat wrapped, pie on top, faithful pie. It waits by the door the way boots wait, the way tools wait. In 50,000 doorways in that city and 1,000 cities like it, the pails are standing ready in the dark. Little tin promises that tomorrow will be survived too, and there is something in the sight of them, patient, dented, upright, that is as close as the industrial world ever came to a prayer. The whistle will blow at 5. It isn't 5. That's the whole mercy of night in a whistle town, and everyone in it sleeps inside that mercy like a walled city. Keep walking backward, out past the last street lamp, and the cobbles give way to frozen ruts, and the ruts thaw into June mud, and the mud smells suddenly of ragweed and horses, and you're standing in the Indiana corn at midday, 47 years earlier, with the sun straight up overhead, and the bell is ringing. Of course it's ringing. It's noon in 1838. The bell is the noon. The farm wife's hand is on the rope, and the sound comes across the fields in rings, like something dropped into still water, and the men straighten up out of the corn rows one by one, hands to the small of the back, hats tipped back, and begin to walk in. No hurry in it at all, that's the thing you notice from here. No hurry anywhere, because the bell isn't a deadline, it's a welcome. The horses lean toward the barn. The dog is already there. The kitchen exhales fried chicken and bread and the 2 kinds of pie out the open door, and the long table is laid, And the sun, the actual sun, the employer of record, stands at the top of its arc holding the whole scene in place, every shadow at its shortest, every farm on the continent eating at its own true and private noon, 1,000 miles of dinners rolling westward with the light. Stand in the lane a moment and let it ring. Of all the sounds in this story, this is the one that was kindest, and it's the one the whole night has been walking back toward. You could stay, but there's one room left, the first room, and it's expecting you. Walk backward up the lane, and the split-rail fences smooth into hedgerows. The corn shrinks into barley. The June heat cools and dampens into English October, and the bell. Listen, the bell doesn't stop. It just gets older, rounder, farther, until it's coming from a stone tower for a huddle of thatch, and you're 11 years old again, in Kent, in 1389, walking in from the ploughing with mud to your shins. The hall is warm. That's what you notice first and last. After the cold field, the animal warmth of one room with a fire in it, and everybody in the manor breathing together under the smoke-black beams. The pottage is in the bowl, bacon rumoured, steaming. The dark bread is in your fist. Down the boards, the ploughman is telling something to the haywood, and up on the dais the white bread gleams like a small moon, and none of it, has an hour attached. Nobody in this room owns a minute. The bell in the tower rings the hours of prayer, near enough when the sexton remembers. Dinner happened when the pot was ready and the light was right. Supper will happen when the dark says so. Not one person under this roof, from the lord at his moon bread down to you with your cracked knuckles, will ever in their lives be late for anything by less than a quarter of an hour, because no smaller lateness exists yet. It hasn't been invented. The whole apparatus of your world, the 7:42, the 1 hour lunch, the 6 o'clock, the mint green hum, is 6 centuries downstream, unimagined and unimaginable, and this boy with his horn spoon will go his whole life without once being ruled by a minute. Eat, boy. Wipe the bowl with the bread. That was the world before the hours, the last room in the museum, the bottom of the night. And you can leave it now, and leave the lamps off on the way out, because you finally know the whole shape of the thing, how supper was soup, how dinner was breakfast, how noon was 3 o'clock, how nothing you were ever told about meal times was fixed, or old, or true, except the hunger and the gathering. Those were always true. And how between this smoky hall and your quiet kitchen, the only thing that really happened is that the work moved, and the meals, loyal as dogs, followed the work. And now there's just you. The last room in the story is the one you're lying in, however it looks. I can't see it, and I don't need to. Somewhere in it or near it there is a clock, glowing on a nightstand, ticking in a hall, sleeping in a phone, and it is keeping to the second the time those men wired together in 1883. You live your whole life inside their Sunday afternoon's work. You've never once, unless you've sailed or soldiered or wandered very far indeed, eaten a single meal by the true time of the actual sun. Tomorrow that clock will wake you, and somewhere around 7 you'll break the night's fast. Dinner's oldest meaning still faithfully performed under another name. And at noon, the monk's migrated hour, the railroad's synchronized hour, your stomach will sound its little inherited whistle, and in the evening you'll sit down to the meal the factory built, at the hour the commute chose, and every bite of all three will be history, eaten warm. That's not a burden. I want to be clear about that, here at the end. It's the opposite. It means the most ordinary acts of your day are the oldest things you do. That when you butter toast at 7, you're standing in a line of firelit mornings, running back past the manor. And when you eat with people you love at 6, you're holding, without effort, without even noticing, the one piece of the whole system that was never invented by anybody, the gathering. The hours were decided for you, yes, by whistle and wire and bell, by clause and statute and timetable, by a century and a half of nobody in particular. But no whistle ever made a family face each other across food. That part is older than the bells, that part is yours. Centuries will pass, you know. They always do. It's the one schedule that keeps itself. The kitchens you have known will change beyond recognition. The way the hall became the farmhouse, became the Milltown flat, became the mint green suburb. The 6 o'clock dinner will drift, is drifting already. The way noon drifted for the monks, the way dinner drifted for the mills. The hours are only ever borrowed, and history calls its loans without notice. The clocks themselves will change, have changed, from tower to pocket to wrist to pocket again, from bronze to brass to quartz to signal, each one more certain than the last, all of them wrong about the sun. Whatever your grandchildren's grandchildren call their meals, they will eat them at hours some machinery chose, and they will be sure, absolutely sure, that their hours are the natural ones, the ancient ones, the way people have always eaten. People will still come in hungry from the cold, still stand in warm kitchens at day's end, lifting lids, stealing tastes, still call each other in, from the yard, from the field, from the next room, from the far side of the world, with bells, with shouts, with 3 words on a screen, with whatever the century gives them to ring. Come and eat. Some things don't change. The hunger doesn't change. The gathering doesn't change. The rest is timetables. So let the timetables go. You can. Now. That's what all of this was for, if it was for anything. It is very late, by a clock some railroad men invented, in a room the whistle can't reach, in the one stretch of hours no one ever fenced. The day you finished is folded and done. It fed you 3 times whatever hours it chose, and it asked whatever it asked, and both of you kept your bargain, and it has gone off wherever days go. Into the archive, into the dark, into the same deep drawer as 1389 and 1750 and 1838 and 1883 and 1956. One more day of kept hours in a country made of them. You did enough today. You were fed enough today. You are warm enough, and still enough, and safe enough, right now, tonight. And enough, as every era of this story knew in its bones, whatever else it got wrong about the hours. Enough is the whole meal. Enough was always the whole meal. Feel how the night has no minutes in it, this far down. This is the ploughboy's kind of time you're breathing now. Unnumbered, uncounted, no smaller lateness invented yet. The kind of time that was here before the bells learned to mean anything. The kind that comes back every night the moment you stop listening for instructions. Nothing is going to ring. Nothing needs you before morning. The pail is packed, so to speak. The fire is banked. The boards are scraped. The bell rope hangs still. And while you lie there in the unfenced hours, here is one last picture to hold, the widest one, the one the whole night has earned you. Because the day you just finished isn't actually finished. Not everywhere. Those 4 great slabs the railroads cut, Eastern, Central, Mountain, Pacific, they're still out there in the dark, doing the thing they've done every night since 1883, and what they do at night is carry the evening westward like a slow bright wave. Right now, this minute, while your kitchen stands dark and done, the country behind your eyelids is still eating. If it's 10 where you are, the dishes are just being washed in Chicago. The pans are still warm in Denver. And out on the far coast it is only now, this very moment, 6 o'clock. The whole institution, the table and the placemats and the calling up the stairs, in full golden swing 3,000 miles away, as fresh as if the evening had just been invented. That smell from the beginning of our story, remember? The onions hitting 1,000,000 pans at once. The continental wave of frying that moves west with the time zones like weather. It's real, and it's rolling right now, 6 o'clock after 6 o'clock after 6 o'clock. Sweeping across the plains and over the mountains and down to the Pacific, the exact same wave that rolled through the farm bells in 1838, only continent-sized now and running on railroad time. And when it slides off the far edge of California into the ocean, it doesn't stop. It keeps going, out across the dark Pacific, where tomorrow is already standing up out of the water. Somewhere out there, right now, it is already noon again. Tomorrow's noon, working its way toward you at 1,000 miles an hour with a sandwich in its hand. Somewhere it is always 6 o'clock. Somewhere the bell is always just now ringing, and the men are always just now straightening up out of the rows, and the screen door is always just now banging, and someone is always being called in to eat. You can sleep in the middle of that. It's one of the better things a person can sleep in the middle of. And the schedule itself doesn't sleep quite. It just changes hands, passes to its night crew, the quiet, inverted people who keep it fed while everyone else lies down inside it. In every city within your time zone right now, bakers are moving through flower-white rooms. They clock in at 2, at 3 in the morning, the hour their traders kept since guild days, because bread for the 7 o'clock toast has to rise before the 7 o'clock world does. Tomorrow's breakfast is being made tonight. It always is. Morning in America is cooked in the dark by people you'll never meet. Out on the interstates, the all-night diners are burning their long fluorescent light over coffee that never stops. Urns going since supper time for the truckers hauling. What else? Food. Refrigerated tomorrow, moving down the highways at 65, lettuce and milk and oranges racing the sunrise to 1,000 loading docks, so the system can perform itself again on schedule. There's a famous painting of that light. Hopper's Nighthawks, 1942. The glass corner diner glowing like an aquarium in the empty street. And people call it lonely. But I've never fully believed that. Look again sometime. It's warm inside, and the coffee's hot, and the counterman has somewhere to be, and something to do. And the whole point of the picture is that the light stays on. Somebody keeps the light on. That's the night shift's whole gospel. And here's my favourite fossil of the entire night, one last one, free, in the plants that run till morning. The ones that never learned how to stop. The crews on the graveyard shift take their contract meal break in the middle of the night. 2:30, 3 o'clock, the moon straight up where the sun should be. And you know what they call that meal? Eating it at an hour with no name, out of boxes and pails, under work lights. They call it lunch. Lunch at 3 in the morning. The schedule is so deep in the language now that it travels with the workers into the dark like a portable noon. Wherever the middle of your workday falls, their lunch is loyal, absurd, faithful as bronze. The monks dragged noon 3 hours down the afternoon. The night shift carried it clean around the clock. Nobody decided that either. Nobody ever decides. It's just the meals. Doing what you've watched them do all night, following the work wherever the work goes, even to the bottom of the dark. Closer now, your own kitchen, every kitchen, is keeping its own small night watch while you drift. The refrigerator hums to itself in the dark, the house's one tireless servant, holding tomorrow at 38 degrees, the eggs in their dozen, the milk for the cereal, the butter for the toast, all of it standing by in the cold little lit museum behind that door, provisioned like a ship. The coffee waits in its jar with the smell folded down inside it. The bread sleeps in the bread box. There are still bread boxes. There will always be bread boxes. And somewhere on a counter in your town tonight, certain as weather, a lunch is already packed. A child's lunchbox or a worker's cooler bag, zipped and squared away by the sink, made up hours ahead by someone who won't eat it, and hold that little object 1 second, because it's the oldest gesture in this whole story still alive and still warm. It's the farm wife's 2-quart pail, packed for the far bottoms. It's the weaver's tin by the door, bread below, pie on top. It's the boy's pail under the school bench. 400 years of hands packing food tonight for people they love to carry tomorrow into the scheduled world. The same fold of the napkin over the top, the same small extra thing slipped in unasked. The apple, the note, the good cookie. The whistle took a great deal, we've established that. It never managed to take this. The packed lunch is love, timed. It's the gathering, sent by courier into the one part of the day the family can't attend. And it's sitting out there right now on 100 million counters in the dark, ready, patient, upright. The little tin promise, handed all the way down. And if you should wake in the small hours, it happens, the night's long, and find yourself standing barefoot on the cold kitchen floor in the light of the open refrigerator, eating something with no name at an hour, with no meal attached to it. Enjoy that, on behalf of everyone in this story. The midnight snack is the one outlaw left. The last meal in America with no bell, no clause, no hour, no dish, no rules. The schedule's general amnesty, older than the schedule itself. Every fenced field has one gap in it, and that's yours, and the ploughboy would understand it instantly. Food taken quietly when the body asks, with the whole dark world to yourself. Then the door swings shut, the little light goes out, the hum resumes, the floor sends you back to bed. The night holds. Nothing needs deciding anywhere, all the way to morning. Let it come now then. Let sleep take you the way noon dinner took the men out of the corn rows. No hurry in it at all, just a ringing somewhere kind, and the long walk in toward warmth, and the straightening up out of the day's bent work. Let the hours of the story ring themselves quiet one last time as you go. The church bell over the manor rounder and farther, the little bright bell on the locust post ringing in, the whistle steam sighing back down the stack, the school bell, the last train, the mint green hum. Farther now and farther like farms going by in the dark. Let the great clocks run on without you. They're good at it. They were built by careful men and they never get hungry, and they will hold noon exactly where the railroads left it until you want it again. Let the day's 3 appointed meals dissolve into the one appointment nobody ever had to schedule. Let your breathing find its own hour. There it is, that slow one. The only timetable your body ever wrote for itself, older than noon, older than bread. Let your thoughts loosen the way a crowd loosens after the whistle, drifting out of the yard in ones and twos, unhurried, hats tipped back, done for the day. Let them go. Let the whole bright, noisy machinery of the hours, the whistles and the wires, the clauses and the counters, the 2 noons and the nickel slots and the 6 o'clock, let it all shut down softly behind you, room by room, the way the automat went dark, lights half down, brass polished, little glass doors ajar, everything sold, everything served, nothing left to ask. Tomorrow there will be hours again. Tomorrow there will be bells in all their modern costumes, and you will answer them and eat when they say, and mostly never mind it, and that's all right. It's a gentle enough harness as history's harnesses go, and there's toast in it. Tomorrow the sun will cross the meridian at its own true private moment over your roof, 4 minutes different from anywhere else, and touch its mark on 10,000 forgotten windowsills, right on time for nobody, for free. Tomorrow, at noon, the old whistle will go off faithfully inside you, and somewhere a small town will blow a real one, for love. But that's tomorrow. That's all the way over on the far side of the night, hours and hours from here, past the last signal tower, and nothing between you and it but this, the dark, the quiet, the unfenced country, the warm bed with your name on it. And this night, this exact night you're lying in, is the same night it has always been. That's the last soft thing to know. The same night the ploughboy slept in, dreamless on straw, with the church bell holding the dark together over the thatch. The same night the hired girl slept in, the banked coals ticking in the hearth below her, the noon mark waiting on the sill for a sun that was still hours out over the Atlantic. The same night that lay over the Indiana farm, the bell rope hanging slack on the locust post, the horses breathing in the barn, tomorrow's dinner still walking round the yard on its own 2 drumsticks. The same night the weaver slept in, 11 hours deep, while the pail stood watch by the door. The same night the jeweller locked his regulators into, all of them agreeing perfectly with a capital city he'd never seen. The same night that filled the automat after the brass was polished, and the Levittown street after the last television went grey. Every person in this story, every single one, rich and poor, ruled and ruling, medieval and modern, they all came down at last to this same place you're in now. A dark room, a day of kept hours behind them, food inside them, and nothing left to obey. The hours divide us all day long. The night is the old commons. Everyone grazes here, so breathe the way they breathed. In, slow, nobody's counting. Out slower, nobody's waiting. Again. The clock on your nightstand keeps its railroad seconds tick and tick and tick. But notice, you don't have to keep them with it anymore. Let it count for both of you. That's what it was built for, to do the counting so that somebody didn't have to. And somewhere along the century and a half we walked tonight that got turned around and people started doing the counting for the clocks. Not now, not here. Now it counts, and you drift, and the numbers fall away behind you like stations behind a night train. Small lit platforms, each with its little bell, each one ringing once kindly as you pass, and none of them your stop. 7 o'clock somewhere back there, with its toast and its percolator heartbeat. Noon, far back now, with its whistles and its wax paper and its bolted stools. 6, the warmest platform, the one with all the kitchen windows lit gold, already miles behind, already tomorrow's, already being set with clean plates in the dark. The train doesn't stop tonight. It runs on the old Mersey, the night Mersey, the one every whistle town slept inside like a walled city. The whistle will blow, but it isn't time. It won't be time for hours and hours. There has never in the whole history of the hours been this much night left. Heavy now, warm now. The day's 3 meals are doing their quiet last work somewhere below your ribs, the oldest chemistry there is, older than fire, needing no bell to tell it when. The house holds its temperatures. The refrigerator hums its one low note, the night watchman making his rounds without moving. Out across the dark, the time zones lie side by side under the stars like fields under snow, Eastern, Central, Mountain, Pacific, all quiet, all keeping, and the last 6 o'clock of the evening is just now folding itself away into the sea. The bakers have hours yet before the flour. The diners burn their small aquarium light for nobody. The packed lunches stand on the counters, squared away, love-timed for tomorrow. The noon marks hold their scratches under the paint. The sun is all the way around the world, taking its true time to the old addresses, in no hurry whatsoever to come back and start the whole beautiful contraption up again. And far down at the bottom of it all, under the zones and the statutes and the timetables, under 6 centuries of bells, the old first thing is still there, unchanged. The thing that was true in the manor hall and true in the corn row, and true at the mint green table, and true in you tonight. A fed body, growing warm, growing heavy, letting go of the day. No one ever had to schedule that. No one ever could. It keeps its own hour, and its hour is now, and it has already begun. You can feel it starting behind your eyes, soft as a shadow crossing a scratch on a windowsill, right on time by the only clock that was never wound by anyone. You've eaten. You're home. The bells are done deciding for the day. Rest now, the way the whole tired, ringing world rests between its noons. Sleep well. Good night.